Good morning, everybody. This is Carrie from the Schmidt House. It's Friday morning, and I'm going to be doing a little cooking this morning. Cooking. I'm going to do some homemade bread and some cooked cheese. This is something that I had growing up a lot when I was a kid. I think it's kind of a German thing, the cooked cheese. When I was a kid, I didn't even know what it was called. It was just Koch Kase. My grandmother would make it. She made it from scratch. She had a milk cow. And the process of making it from scratch, I'm not even sure. It's a long process. But she would make it for his family and friends. And then I had two great aunts that also made it, and they would actually make it for the public. And you could actually go to a local grocery store once a week and buy it until it sold out. And it would sell out really quick, because it was really good stuff. The way I make it, it's a shortcut method. Not as good as the from scratch method, but it's pretty close. I like it. But I'm gonna go ahead and make that, and I'm gonna start off with making some bread first. So I'm gonna make my bread a little different this time. I've never used a mixer, and my wife bought me this mixer, and I'm gonna try using it to mix the dough and knead the bread. I'm told it works great, so we're gonna find out. So what I've done first, I put 2 3/4 cup of warm water in there. It's probably around 105 degrees. I just checked it. I don't know, I've seen directions where people make bread and they say it has to be exactly 110. I don't do that. I just take the warm water right out of the tap. That's what I use, and that always works great. I'm going to use a 1/2 tablespoon of yeast. Two tablespoons of sugar. Actually, what did I say? 2? Actually, 3. 3 tablespoons of sugar is what I use. And this larger. This batch will make 2 loaves of bread. Usually I'll make a smaller one. Ingredients are a little different. And a tablespoon of salt. That up in there. I'll let that set a little bit to let that yeast activate. Let that set a few minutes, and then I'm going to add about 1/2 of the flour. This recipe calls for like 6.5 cups of flour total, and I'm going to start out adding about 3 cups. Turn the mixer on, and once it gets kind of mixed smooth, then slowly add the rest of the flour a little at a time. I'm going to strain my yeast. I mean, not my yeast, the flour. So I don't have big chunks in there. I've made bread before where I didn't strain it, and I really didn't have any issues. Worked just fine. But I'm going to strain it. Make a big mess here. And I'm just going to let this video run. You see, I'm just straining it through here. I'll probably edit out some of the stuff, make it go a little quicker. I'm not the best YouTuber, still learning a lot. But what I do know is shorter videos seems to hold people's interest. At this point of the bread making, I always wanted to add like a teaspoon of vanilla to my water, just to see how that would happen, how that would work, or how it would taste. I've never done that. I don't want to do it now. I don't want to ruin this batch. But I am going to try that once. If anybody's ever tried that or done that, let me know. It's starting to really, yeast is really starting to activate and move around a lot. So that's what we're wanting. Stir. And I want to go get my dough hook and put that on there. And I've never used this before, so this might be a total disaster. But I hope not. I'll just add this straight to the water. You know what, I'm going to go ahead and mix up my other ingredients. Check this out. Get some on the edges that don't get mixed in, and just in there. Seems to be working pretty good. Little mixer seems like it's straining a little bit. And I think I'm just going to leave it in this bowl to let it rise. We'll let that work about a minute or two. Sure looks like it needs more flour. But I've made this recipe, this exact recipe by hand, several times before. And that's exactly what it calls for, what I put in here. Yeah, it sure is wet. You know what, I think I'm just going to add a little more flour, because I just don't like the way that looks. That looks just too wet. Another half a cup. Oh, that looks a little better to me. I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to see if I can roll it a little bit in my hands into a ball. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to cover this up, and I'm just going to let it rise for about an hour and a half or so. And then I'll knead it again by hand, turn it a little bit, break it into 2 pieces, let it set another 30-40 minutes, and then we'll put it in some greased bread pans, and it's ready to bake. So, okay, the bread dough's been rising for about an hour, a little over an hour, and I think it still has a little ways to go. So I'm going to just let that alone, cover it back up, and just let that rise for a while yet. So while I'm waiting on that, I'm going to go ahead and start on the cooked cheese. What I've done, I've mixed here in a bowl 2 tablespoons of self-rising flour, a half teaspoon of just this regular old baking soda here, and half a teaspoon of salt. And with that, I'm going to put in 2 cups of cottage cheese. Got 2 cups here. I'll mix that all together, and then you just let it set till it gets kind of bubbly. And it'll take a couple hours until the next step. This cottage cheese will come in a 16-ounce little package, and that's generally what I get, but for some reason this time I got a 24-ounce, so I could have altered the recipe and used the 24 ounces, but since I'm making a video, I didn't want to take a chance on messing anything up, so I just measured out 2 cups, which is 16 ounces. Had a little left over, and we'll just cover this up and let it set probably a couple hours. You see it'll kind of all smoothen out and get kind of bubbly. And okay, our bread has been rising probably about an hour and 40 minutes, and I think it's ready to come out of there, and kind of knead it a little bit one more time, break it in half, split it, and then we'll put it in our baking pans. We'll kind of coat them with a little bit of this here cooking spray. We'll cover them and let them set and rise again for another 30 minutes. We'll sprinkle a little flour down here and see how this comes out of here. Break it, mash it in a little bit. It is sticking pretty good to the side. So, a little flour on there so I can work it. The 2 pieces. That's pretty close. Not too crazy about it. Just kind of turn it a little bit. Go ahead and just lightly coat our pan here a little bit. In there. Well, that sure ain't very pretty. We'll hope it's gonna come out okay. Cover them. Let them rise for about another 30 minutes. We'll look at this. It's starting to kind of break down a little bit. But it's got a good long way to go yet. So I think our bread has risen enough and it's ready to go in the oven. For some reason, this one over here seemed to work better than this one. I don't understand why. They were both work the same amount. It's the exact same ingredients. I just cut the big chunk of dough in half. But this one over here, for some reason, when I put it in there, it seemed stickier, and it didn't rise as much as this one did. But we're gonna go ahead and bake them and see how they turn out. I'm sure they'll be fine. As soon as the oven preheats, we got it at 375, and we're gonna, oh, there it goes, and we're going to bake it for, I don't know, 35 minutes. We just look at it. After about 30 minutes, look at it. Sometimes they're ready. Depending on your oven, you might want to go 5 minutes longer, depending on how dark you want your bread to be on top. But we're going to put this in for 30 minutes. And our other stuff here is coming along slow. It's not really getting bubbly. I see a few little bubbles in there starting to happen, but it's taking a little while. It may take longer than the 2 hours, but that's okay. Okay, the bread's been baking for 35 minutes. I had it in for 30, looked at it, and decided to leave it in for another 5. And now it's time to come out. And it's looking good. Just dump them out. Very hot. Sounds good. Smells very good. And we'll just let that sit there and cool. And next, we're going to go ahead and make the cooked cheese. Okay, we take a half a cup of butter and a half a cup of whipping cream. And I like to melt my butter first. So we'll put it in here. Melt that with the, let's get this started, melted a little bit. Once it's started, then I'll pour in the whipping cream, get it all gelled together, and then we'll pour in our cottage cheese. And then we really need to be careful. We have to watch it on low heat. This stuff will stick to the bottom of the pan and it'll burn, and then you've kind of ruined your cooked cheese, and we don't want that to happen. Then that's starting to melt. We'll pour in our cottage cheese. Get it all out of there. Not cottage cheese, whipping cream, heavy whipping cream. In the old days, I don't know exactly how they made it. I do know they'd milk a cow. You take your cow milk and you let it set till it starts to separate and curdle, where you get the little lumps and stuff in it. And after it had done that, then you would strain it. That's where I think the term curds and whey, you come up with your curds and whey. I think they would strain it at that point through a cheesecloth or a strainer. And then all your curds, the little lumpy stuff with a little bit of the whey in it, they would put that in like a bag or a cheesecloth and just hang it out in the smokehouse. I think my grandmother would hang it in the smokehouse. If you didn't have a smokehouse, you could just hang it outside. Under a tree, or hanging off the windmill, or something like that. And that would hang there for a few days until it quit dripping, so everything was dried up. And at that point, I'm not exactly sure what they would do next. I believe they would mix something with it. They may mix like salt and baking soda and that kind of stuff in there. And I think it was salt and baking soda they would mix in there and let it set for another 2 or 3 days. And they would have to turn it a lot. Keep it turned, keep it all well mixed. And I think it would kind of harden a little bit, dry out. And when it was all crumbly, dried out, then then you would take that, you break it up in little pieces, bag it up, freeze it, whatever, and then when you wanted to use some, I think you would put some butter in a saucepan, just like we're doing here, just butter, then put one of those little bricks that you made in there, and just heat it up, stirring it constantly, because like I say, and especially these thin pans, they'll burn pretty easy. You know, I think in the old days, most of those people used cast iron, and they would do it in a cast iron. And in fact, I've made this in a cast iron pan, and probably works a little better even. You don't have to, cast iron holds so much heat. You know, you can do it at a lower heat, and you don't have to worry about it burning. This stuff will burn pretty easily, the bottom of that pan. You really gotta watch your temperature. Keep it stirred. And this will take a good 20 minutes or better to get all the lumps are all out and everything's really creamy. And once you got everything really creamy, you're pretty much done. Then you take it off the heat and let it set a little while, or you can pour it into some plastic containers. Like for us, this will make a couple of meals. The girls, they're little, they don't really care for this kind of stuff. And Andrea, I kind of introduced her to it. She'd never heard of it, and she really likes it. She likes any kind of cheese stuff. So. This isn't exactly the way the old-fashioned stuff was. It doesn't have the exact taste. It's a little different, but it's about as close as I've gotten. It's really good. I do like it. Take you some of that homemade bread. Slice a nice size slice off of there. Put you some butter on there, especially when that bread's still a little warm. Have that butter melt on there, and then take you a spoonful of this and just pile it up on that bread. It's awesome. Or you can eat with crackers. I prefer it with bread. If it wasn't a Friday, my favorite way to eat it would be to have some homemade deer sausage sliced up on a big plate on the table, and have a pot of this sitting on the table with some bread, and just get some of this and some homemade sausage. Kind of hard to beat it. So I don't know exactly how long it's been. I didn't look at the clock when I started doing this, but I noticed it's starting to stick a little bit, or wanting to stick a little bit on the bottom, and it's completely creamy. So I'm going to say it's done. I'm going to take it off the heat. Dang fly in here. Can't stand that. Flies are so bad. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pour it in this plastic little pot here. Ooh, almost didn't fit. Just right. I knew it was going to fit because I've used this before for this. Another reason I didn't alter that recipe and use all that cottage cheese, because I knew my pot wasn't going to be, my little storage thing here wasn't going to be big enough. Cover this up, keep the fly off of it until I can get it killed, and let it set a little while. When it starts to set up, I'll cut some of this bread and we'll give it a try. All right, we're going to go ahead and cut into the bread. This loaf is a little smaller than this one, and this is the one that was a little sticky, and I don't know why. I think it's fine. I think possibly when I split the dough in half, I had a little more in this one than in that one. We'll cut it in half or slice it up. What does the cameraman think?
It looks really good. Avery thought it smelled good when she got home.
You know, this stuff slices a lot better when it's cold, but it probably tastes better when it's warm.
Hey, Mama!
I've got food anxiety right now. It smells so good in here. Just put some of this butter on this warm bread. Smear it on there. We don't smear. Germans don't smear. We smear. We'll go over here. And this hasn't quite set up yet. This works better if you let it set out and it gets a little thicker. But it's going to work. Put a little more on there. Never can have too much. Try it out. Delicious. Messy, but delicious. Well, hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to try this recipe, it's very simple. It's a little time consuming. You got to let the bread rise and let your cottage cheese set once you put the baking soda in it. But other than that, very simple. It's very good. I'm sure to bake a loaf of bread or 2 loaves of bread like this is probably half the cost of buying one in the store. It's a lot better. But give us a like, subscribe. If you have a similar recipe, share it with us. Appreciate it. Have a good one.